And welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for the first episode in another brand new series on the channel, which is kind of a new one, kind of not, because it's a spin-off of our Raw Reactions show. And that's the Raw Reaction preview show, which is going to be happening every single match day. Although earlier today, when Sky decided to drop their internet, I was sort of worried that this might not happen, but it is. Thankfully, the internet has returned in a brand new format, and I'm really excited to see where this sort of goes. It's kind of freehand, it's kind of discussion based with you guys in the chat and myself. There might be guests in the future, there might not, but I kind of want to keep this similar to the Raw Reaction show straight after the games, in which it is just me and you having a discussion, talking in the live chat, which is what I love to do with you guys, and get your thoughts ahead of what is a massive game. And thank God football is finally back. And Arsenal is finally back, because we have been suffering. And I know that there has been millions of people, thousands of people across the world suffering a lot worse because of the horrible situation that we're in. And I hope in some ways football can bring back happiness for a lot of people, because I know that people have been struggling without it. I certainly have. The Bundesliga could only take me so far in terms of my love of football, because I've been yearning for Arsenal to be back playing, and we are tomorrow, 8:15 UK time, against Manchester City. Of course, people watching everywhere else in the world, please let me know, what time are you getting up to watch that game? Are you having to get up early? Are you having to stay up late to watch the Arsenal? Let me know in the comment section below. Before we jump into the video, I just want to show you something that I showed you at the end of yesterday's show, which was the Tactical Breakdown podcast with Drew, seeing as this is the first show. So this is how things are going to work going forwards. Every single match day beforehand, there will be a Raw Reaction preview show like you're seeing today. On match day tomorrow, straight after the game, there'll be a Raw Reaction show, which you can join in. So as soon as the match finishes, you hop onto the channel and you get ready for a live show for about a 20, 30-minute breakdown, massively influenced by you guys. Loads of comments will be coming up throughout. Loving that sort of layout that we've done previously. Day after, podcast every time, fingers crossed. There will always be a podcast after a match day. This week, I'm joined by Drew, John, and Raf. They're going to be joining me at 8:30 on Thursday. And then Friday to Monday, one of those days, there will be a Tactical Breakdown podcast with myself and Drew and a guest. Our one from yesterday with Sam Lee from The Athletic, the Manchester City correspondent, is still up. So please make sure you go and check that one out. The Tactical Breakdown show with all of our tactical breakdowns and analysis and expert views of transfers will still be around. Every time we link to a player heavily, I'll be making sure that I get you the expert insight on those players and the statistical analysis as well. And then when there's a bit of a break and there's not much going on, we're going to definitely have a show called the Raw Reactions Big Question, where we look at a controversial topic and get heavily influenced by, again, you guys in the chat box. And then for our Plus and Expert members, which will be starting again in July, if you'd like to become a member and help support the channel, there's going to be loads of content coming out for you next month and beyond. So there you go. There is everything that's going to be happening regarding the channel. But we're here today, obviously, to discuss Arsenal playing Manchester City, which for me, I'm not hugely optimistic about this game. I'm really not. I'm really struggling to see how Arsenal might come out. We've had a difficult preparation, if you want to call it that. I mean, yes, 6-0 against Charlton, great. And I can't help but rub it into the missus every single time I talk about it, and her father. But also the fact that we weren't allowed, that they weren't allowed to tackle us. Was a big factor. And of course, Brentford, that game did not go to plan whatsoever. And there was a lot of defensive flaws and mistakes in that game. We saw from the likes of Holding and David Luiz especially. And that doesn't fill me with loads of confidence when you know we're going to be coming up against a much better side in Manchester City. But how much can you take from those games? We had a really great chat with Sam Lee yesterday where we were talking about you can't really take too much from those games. It's just not something you can get a real barometer of quality. And we often see that with pre-season. I don't know how much of an influence it's going to have. Probably none. But at the same time, there are clear errors that keep happening in this Arsenal side that need eradicating. I personally don't feel they're going to be eradicated without a changing of the guard in terms of those players that create those huge mistakes. But we still need to work on improving Arsenal as a club, and coaching. Arteta has got a massive job. And the biggest narrative around this game really has obviously been Arteta returning to Manchester City to face his former master, his former mentor in Pep Guardiola. And so much has been made about this. For me, as Sam said yesterday on the show, it's just one game. If Arsenal even come out of a win, I don't think you can turn around and say Arteta is the next coming of Guardiola, because it is just one game. And it takes so much time before Arteta can really stamp his authority and what he wants from this side on that team. And I think that's a really important point. Let's see what some of you guys are saying in the chat box before we go on. Tiger T, thank you ever so much. Eurus, thank you ever so much for tuning in. Omar is in here as well. There's loads of you in here tonight. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. Ray, evening Tom from Jamaica. Match will be at 2:15. Oh, so that's a decent time for you, Ray. Enjoy the game. Are you going to have a beer for the match? Says Mitchell Bowsen. Yes, of course. Repping probably the Brewdog at some point. If you haven't got on the Brewdog, you need to get on the Brewdog. It's a fantastic stuff. They're not sponsoring this. I just really like it. Although I was trying a saffron beer. Well, yeah, I know. Look at me having a saffron beer, but they're actually quite nice. So there's lots. Or as Mike would say, an indigenous. And if you want to know the story behind that, you need to go tweet at the Gooners Pod and find out why I might be drinking an indigenous, as we're putting it these days. But there's so much around this game, and I kind of want to delve into how I think Arteta might tackle it. Now, to do that, I'm going to show you how I would like to see us line up against Manchester City. And for me, with our brand, I mean, I'm loving the graphics. I've really put in the effort getting these exactly the same. My OCD is going wild, really trying to obsessively do everything the same. I do suffer from it. So in goal, Bernd Leno, Bellerin at right back, Luiz and Marie at centre backs, Tierney at left back, Xhaka, Sabas and Willock in midfield, Pepe, Aubameyang and Saka as a front three. So let's break this down, talk it through. Tell me if you disagree. Tell me who you actually would rather be seeing in that side. Avinash Singh, one of our new members, is going to be watching at 12:45 a.m. in India. That is going to be a tough one for you, Avinash. So good luck with that, mate. So here we go. Leno in goal is just, it is what it is for me. Leno is just the goalkeeper. There is no debate around it. There's not even worth a discussion. For me, Arsenal need to be looking at a goalkeeper in the summer to replace him replace the likes of Emi Martinez and Matt Macy to get better competition for Leno. Personally, that's how I feel. But there is no doubt in my mind that Leno starts. Right back, Bellerin has been massively sort of criticised in a way in how he's returned from injury, not really been the same player. But I think he showed some really bright sparks in the warm-up games. I think he could be back to one of the best Bellerins that we've seen. That is completely speculative, and there's only one way to find out, and that's to see how he plays. Now, the centre-back area is an interesting one. The centre-back area for me is so difficult to try and predict. And I can see a lot of your comments talking about the midfield, and don't worry, I'm going to come on to my reasoning behind it, so stick with me. The reason I would like to see Luiz and Marie is because I think the best chance we have to get anything in this game is to play on the counter-attack. And what those two centre-backs provide you with is they provide fantastic distribution. They provide really good balls to the wide areas, balls in behind. The amount of times David Luiz played Aubameyang in behind last season, rather this season, I called it last season because it feels like a season ago now. I just feel that those two there, because it doesn't matter who else you pick. You could pick Socrates, you could pick Mustafi, you could pick Holding. All of these centre-backs have got mistakes in them. All of them are not perfect. All of them are not top quality for me. They're all okay centre-backs. Marie, I don't know enough about, but I'm liking what I've seen of him. He's played against Liverpool and done really well in the Club World Cup for Flamengo. And for me, I just go with those two because I think they offer the most in terms of the providing the balls out from the back. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I just don't see a better centre-back combination because you're not going to see mistakes. You're going to see the same amount of mistakes from everyone else in this side, and that is a big, big worry. Let's look at Kieran Tierney then. This obviously isn't what I think Arteta's going to go with. This is how I personally feel. Tierney, I think, coming back into full fitness is a massive boost for the club. He went out because of a shoulder injury, I believe it was, dislocation in the Europa League or the Cup, one of those games. And that basically signalled the beginning of Bukayo Saka being our new left-back. And don't get me wrong, I think Bukayo Saka did brilliantly. He's our most creative player from left-back. I personally put Tierney there as more of an example to see Saka playing further up the pitch. You've also then got the opportunity of having two players on that left-hand side where City are notoriously dangerous, be it Sterling or Mahrez or Bernardo Silva, where you've got two players in Tierney and Saka that can both do defensive work. And that's why I think not putting Aubameyang on the left-hand side, who isn't that much inclined to return and get back and defend as effectively, that is why I'm playing both Tierney and Saka on that side. I think defensively, it holds us better together. Now, the midfield, I can see plenty of you in the chat, first of all, seeing the name Xhaka and just thinking, oh my God. Also, the intellectual investor has said, why not Torreira as centre-back? The reason I've not put Torreira in there is because he's a massive doubt for the game. Had Torreira been fully fit, 100%, guys, I would agree with you, and I'd be putting Torreira straight in there ahead of either one of Willock or Ceballos, because I just think he's easily our best defensive-minded and that sort of defensive-minded player, but Torreira isn't match fit, and that's why I could not put him in that team. So hold your fire on the criticism of not putting Torreira in there. That's why. Chris KR7, he is not match fit, as Chris says there. Now, the reason that then sort of limits things, because Xhaka has to play because he's our most defensive midfielder. You could argue that Ainsley Maitland-Niles could go in there. I just don't think he's personally good enough. Xhaka has so many things wrong with him. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, it's painful, but we just don't have the selection in there to go for. I think Guendouzi is too much of a hothead in this game and could see yellows, even reds. And I just don't think the inexperience of Guendouzi is enough to make me pick him over the inexperienced Willock. Because for me, I just look at a midfield three. And I know a lot of people wanted to see a 4-3-3. This is how I think it should work. Obviously, on the defending side of things, Ceballos and Willock both would track back. We're not playing with a number 10, although I think that Arteta probably will go with Ozil. The reason I've not gone with Ozil myself isn't because of any criticisms of him. And no agenda against Mesut Ozil. It's purely because in a big away games, Mesut Ozil just gets isolated, doesn't really do what he's best at. And I just think that we need to be more cautious, a little bit better and hitting them on the break with as many midfield players back as possible to link the midfield to the forward line. That's just where I'm seeing things. I think Ceballos has really turned things around for Mikel Arteta. Arteta's opinion on the Spaniard has changed a lot, and that's why I would go with it. Chris says double pivot of Xhaka and Ceballos and Willock slightly ahead. That is exactly where I'm going at. I think Willock will probably be the most advanced. The reason I put Xhaka in behind there is just to show that he's probably the most defensive player of those three. But I agree with you completely. I think Willock probably would be the most advanced of those three, which is surprising because Ceballos is known as mainly an attacking player. Manesh definitely agrees. He thinks it's the best lineup. I appreciate that, mate. Let's talk about what Joseph says. Joseph says, big mistake to put Xhaka as CDM. He failed at that role. Again, I want to get through to you the point that I'm only putting Xhaka in that most deeper position here on paper because he is the most defensive of the three. In reality, Willock and Ceballos would drop into more of a flat back three, or Willock is slightly ahead with a pivot of Xhaka and Ceballos. I'm only showing it in this sense because Ceballos and Willock are naturally more offensive players. And I didn't want it to look like we were playing with a number 10, which if I had put a pivot and then a one in front, it makes it look like a number 10. That's not what I want us to play like, hence the positioning here. Let's move to the front three. I think the left-hand side with Saka, I've already talked about. I think playing Saka and Tierney on that left-hand side definitely gives you more defensive. Avinash, our member, says, why Saka over Martinelli? Again, I'm putting forward the point that I think the Martinelli would leave us slightly exposed. I love the Brazilian kid. I think he's great. I think he offers such great goal-scoring threat. But ultimately, we need to be real. We're playing against Manchester City here, and Saka and Tierney on that side, I think, provide us more cover and a lot sturdier and more industrial. And you've got to also think that Saka is arguably the most creative player in our team at the moment, and with the pace that he has on the break could really do some damage. Pepe on the right-hand side, Pepe started to really turn things around under Mikel Arteta, really started to flourish and do a lot better. I don't think there's anyone else you could really put on that side that gives you any better cover for Bellerin. You could talk about Nelson, you could talk about even playing Ainsley Maitland-Niles on right wing to give you better defensive cover. I don't think they're viable options. Pepe, for me, has to start, has to be on the right-hand side. He's great on the counter, and I think that he would do really well for us. Aubameyang playing as a central striker is where I want him, is where he plays best. You can throw some statistics at me saying he scores more goals playing on the wing, but ultimately it's a very closed analysis to play. If you look at it in the long term, playing him out wide does lessen the impactfulness of the player, and ultimately, usually, in these big games, Aubameyang often ends up getting isolated, and he's only really going to be there as the man to take the cool chances. Could I put Aubameyang on the left and Lacazette through the middle? Yes, you could do that. I just think defensively this lineup makes us a lot more solid and a lot more sturdy. Let's go through some of your comments before we wrap things up in terms of the lineup. Martinelli, Chris says, Martinelli, remember he gave Otamendi and Walker troubles? Yes, he did. And I'm not saying that. And that was in the home, sort of the home side of things. At the Etihad, I know this is really specific circumstances and maybe home and away factor doesn't even come into it as much anymore, but I just feel that we need to be playing slightly more defensive. Ray, but Pepe doesn't do defensive work, and I admit that. He definitely doesn't do as much defensive work, but I just don't know who you would put in that right wing slot that would give you any more without taking away any sort of verve in the attacking sense. And I think it's the balance that you've got to think about, and playing one more defensive player in Saka in the front three probably makes things fine. O'Malley says this is the proper lineup for a very fluid team. This team shape changes. I think a lot of times when people see a picture come up on the screen, and maybe I could do better with some arrows and some different tactics on here, and maybe that's something to change in the future. But you look at that lineup and you think, oh my God, Xhaka's playing at CDM. But actually, you need to think about, we're not playing with two number 10s here. We're playing with Xhaka, arguably deepest in a midfield with two number 8s and Sebastian Willock that are going to get back and defend. And it could become more of a flat back three than necessarily with either a pivot or a sole CDM. What you're seeing there is mainly what Arsenal would look like on the attack. If you were to look at them in a defensive sense, it would look very different. Adam says Martinelli does have the better work rate though and is more tenacious compared to Saka. I'd imagine Gabby and Tierney would do a better job on Walker and Sterling. I see your point about work rate, and Martinelli can run for absolute days. But defensively, quality-wise, you've got a Saka there who's been playing week in, week out at left-back. He's honed his skills and improved them defensively. For me, that outweighs. If you're playing at home, I would be more on board, Adam, with what you're saying there. I just think that defensively, having Saka gives you more security. Joseph says, can you describe the way you'd approach the game with this team? Beyond more than I've already said, defensively, Saka covers Tierney. The two centre-backs are going to be best used using their distribution on the ball to get balls in behind to Pepe and Aubameyang. Sebastian Willock drop in with Xhaka when we're on the defence. Xhaka stays as sort of staying back while we're attacking, and Willock and Ceballos press forward and really push up the ball and help with the counter-attacks. But also, as soon as we lose it, they drop back. I hope that's sort of a condensed description for all. Carol says, everyone raves over Martinelli, but no one seems to want to start him, including Arteta. If he doesn't play regularly, he will do a Gnabry in the year. Now, I think you raise an absolutely perfect point there, Carol, but don't be too paranoid about it. Gnabry is a very, very specific example. It was a very, very different time. We sent him on loan to West Brom. Martinelli is getting minutes. He's still exceptionally young. You have to think about when we brought him in, it was never thought that he would be going into this first team. So that's where my head's at with Martinelli. I don't think you need to worry about him too much. Ray says we can't. Oh, hold on. Let's go to Omar first. Tom, for me, we have to win the midfield battle because if you remember, they smashed us in December because we left a lot of space in the middle of the park, which they exposed to devastating effect. We talked about it on the Tactical Breakdown podcast. The midfield is where it's going to be won and lost for me. If they overload us, they've got so much quality with De Bruyne. If they start David Silva, they've got Rodri. There's so much in that midfield that can just overpower you in terms of physicality and technical ability, and it's really where we need to be on it. Ray says we can't start getting doozy over Xhaka if there is no Torreira. That's 100% the reason why I went with Xhaka. And even if Torreira was fit, playing Xhaka and Torreira is probably the right choice. Still, there is a massive stigma around Xhaka. I get it. I have so many criticisms of the Swiss midfielder, but if you're being real, there's not really much else. We just don't have the players to say, let's chuck out Xhaka right now. If we sign the likes of Thomas Partey, sign the likes of Gerson, to sign the likes of even Kokchu to a lesser extent, which isn't going to happen now, then yeah, I'd agree with you. But that's not going to happen at the moment until the end of the season, and that's why Xhaka, we just need to get behind him for the moment. Defending formation without the ball, 4-4-2. Yeah, it probably turns into more of a 4-4-2 with Saka dropping in and Pepe going into that strike and roll with Aubameyang to hit on the counter. But you could argue it goes into more of a 4-5-1 than a 4-4-2. Adam, Tom, do you reckon they play Fernandinho back in the middle or keep him at centre-back? We'd be in trouble. Well, if you listen back to the podcast with Sam yesterday, he reckons it's going to be Fernandinho and Laporte at the centre-back roles. So who knows? it's really interesting at what they line up, because with City, they are the worst team to back in fantasy football because you just never know who is going to start with Guardiola. But Sam seems to reckon it's going to be Fernandinho and Laporte. Laguna's Pod, Tom, will your hair be brushed for the big day? I mean, look at it. It's horrific. This is so bad. It's because the hairdressers are still closed that I've had to, sweat it back. It's horrific. It's so bad. It's awful. And it's not looking good, is it, Mike? But still, it's not a comb over. Ray Anderson says, if Torreira was fit, then I'll use him and Sabas as a fit. Yeah, I mean, we're dealing in ifs and buts now. I wish that Torreira was fit, but the fact of the matter is that he isn't. Let's finally then go on to predictions for the game. My head is just telling me this is going to be 3-0. That's where my head's at. I can't see us scoring. Like, even with playing with the right formation, I don't think I can see us scoring. But the thing is, this is such an unknown quantity of a game, because you just don't know how either team's going to come out of the international break. It's so tough to call. My optimism wants to go 2-2. But you know what I'm like, my optimism. We used to have a thing on the show where we'd say that Coquelin would score and we'd win 1-0, and it never happened. And that's my optimism just being trampled into the ground by a Manchester City side. I just can't see us getting something from this game right now. City are coming back off a break. All their players are back fit, even Leroy Sané, who I don't think would be risked because he's not match fit, he hasn't really played. But still, there's so much quality in that side. And with the 5 substitution rule as well, they can bring off. So they have so much depth that they can bring off their front 5 and bring on their front 5. They could start with De Bruyne, with David Silva, with Aguero, Sane and Sterling. Take those 5 off. And then you're bringing on the likes of Jesus, Mahrez. Like, you've got so much Foden. You've got so much quality in that Manchester City team that I just don't get how we're going to get past it. I really don't. Let's get your predictions in the chat box then. Omar reckons 3-1 City. Euros reckons 3 for City as well. Chris says 2-2. Come on. Thinking positively. I like it. Ray Anderson reckons 2-0. Mike is going for 8-0 Martinelli with 5 Guendouzi contracts. COVID, because he can't keep licking. Jesus, Mike, come on. Have a bit of class, fella. Dark Zero says, Simeone Thomas was the best midfielder in our team, and the ability to link defence and attack is performing consistently well. That the biggest clubs in Europe are keeping an eye on him. I mean, fingers crossed we sign him is all I can say on that. Tiger T is saying 1-0 to the Arsenal. Manouche reckons 1-1. So there's some positivity, which is nice. And I mean, fair play to you guys for being as positive as you are. I can't quite see it that positively. I'm praying to every god under the sun that we can get something from this game. I just personally can't see it. If you've been watching on playback, please let me know what you think in the comment section below. Please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll see you again tomorrow, straight after the game. Make sure you turn those notifications on so you can jump into our live chat immediately after it has finished. Other than that, it's been an absolute pleasure doing the first Raw Reactions preview with you guys. Looking forward to tomorrow's show. Looking forward to the game. Stay safe, stay well, and as always, up the Arsenal.